Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are. My name is Alexis Villanueva, and I'm the Academy Administrator for the ICC. Very happy to be here with you today. We are going to be learning and hearing from Dr. Odnolasky, who is one of the experts that works with us. And I just want to give you a little introduction on what we're going to be doing today and what we're going to be talking about today. But before I do, I would like to check and double check if everyone can hear me and if you can see the screen. So if you could please raise your hands, the little hand symbol on the app or on your phone, so we can see if you can hear us correctly and see us correctly. Okay, I see a few hands. Okay, seems to be working fine. Okay, so I want to give first of all an introduction to Dr. Odnolasky. He's a coach. He's an executive coach and also a team coach. Dr. Odnolasky is the founder of the Interdevelopmental Institute, where he has been teaching developmental tools for coaching for the past 16 years. And this is based close to Boston, in Massachusetts. And he has developed a unique system based on the developmental levels or the maturity of clients and also of coaches. And today he will be speaking about the relationship between developmental coaching and NLP. And this is also going to be the introduction to our upcoming course, Developmental Tools for Executive Coaching, which will be starting on June 20th. So it's coming very soon. So this is going to be the introduction to that course. We want to get you all excited about this course, and we know that you're going to benefit a lot from taking this course. So we want you to be very clear on what it's about. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Odnolasky. Otto, thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Alexis. I would like to welcome all of you. Bienvenido. My topic is benefits of using developmental tools in executive coaching, a step beyond NLP. So I will be talking about a methodology that takes up topics of NLP, its focus on how people use language, and it broadens and deepens that approach. And the methodology I'm going to talk about is called CDF, Constructive Developmental Framework, and it's a deepening of NLP, as I will show you. So thanks, first of all, for being here. Let me start this way. On slide 2, what I'm saying is the organization of work is changing all over the world. And essentially what's happening is that there's less emphasis on hierarchy and predefined roles, especially in startups, but not only in startups. And what that entails for your clients and yourself is a greater need for flexibility of thinking and self-awareness of one's emotions, something I refer to as self-authoring. I don't think the coaching world is prepared for these changes in the world of work. And I want to show you one avenue here for updating your coaching skill or skills to be effective in this new world of work. The conventional organization is structured in terms of levels of accountability, as you can see here. You go from people and clients who are focused on quality and service delivery to people who try to optimize what is being done in the organization at the moment, to people who study the value streams and the operational flows in the organization. And the higher we go, the more we are not dealing with the present, but with the future. So you will have clients who are supposed to create breakthroughs in their business and even develop new business models. And as you go up the ladder here, there is a need for more complex thinking, dealing with greater uncertainty, and that's what this course is about. How can we address clients at the level at which they are working? Because these levels are not just levels of organizations, they are also levels of thinking and feeling. As I say here, depending on the level, which I call work level, depending on the work level, the clients you find on these levels think differently, feel differently, speak differently, and relate to other people differently. And these are developmental differences that I will speak about, not just differences in job description. So I want to help you understand how developmental levels and knowing developmental levels can help you meeting a client where the client is. If you teach a client on the second level as if he was on the first level, you are not doing him much of a favor. And if you coach somebody who is at this high level of creating breakthroughs as if he was at the lower level, you are also not making, you are also not being effective. So let's see what this all means. As I already indicated, each of these levels requires a different kind of thinking. And I'm putting thinking into the foreground here for a moment, and you can see that we go from procedural to diagnostic thinking to reflection on process to complex systems thinking and to what I would call holistic integrative thinking. So at the highest level, where the highest paid executives are, they only think about the future, whereas the people at lower level think about today and maybe tomorrow, but not what is 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead. So if you want to be a high-level coach dealing with high-level clients, you need to know the thinking at these higher levels. And that's what I'm going to try to help you in this course. There is another new challenge for coaching and coaches, which is called shared leadership. Shared leadership is especially topical in startups, but it's beginning to influence more established companies as well. And the notion here is that leadership should be shared, which means in a way to do away with the levels I've been talking about, at least to some extent. Now, the coaching issue here is that people are not equal. They may be equal in their shared leadership circle, or they may be supposed to be, but they are not developmentally equal because they are at different levels of emotional development and development of thinking. So how can you as a coach get a feeling for what is the level of development of your client, and how can you help your client to go to a higher level? That's what this course is about. So coaching in the future, or in the present really, has a lot of new challenges. The fact that work is being reorganized in different ways compared to older models of work delivery. Let me say a little bit about development coaching. Of course, you would agree that all coaching has developmental effects. But what I mean by developmental here is very emphatic and has to do with research in adult development that has been taking place, especially in the US, since 1975. I want to show you in what way developmental coaching can be looked at as a refinement of NLP, which first focused on clients' and coaches' use of language. In brief, this is so because developmental coaching focuses on how clients use language, because how they use language reveals their level of development. And that's probably something you previously have not heard about. thought about and have not had to deal with. Let me give you an example. If a client of yours is saying, I can't really get along well with my boss, he doesn't like to delegate, but on the other hand, he also wants me to go ahead and make decisions independently of him. I can, as a developmental listener, as a coach who knows developmental level, I can tell you that that is a particular developmental level. It's level 3, and I will show you that. At level 4, your client would not say that. At level 2, he also wouldn't say that. Nor would he do that at level 5. So I'm going to distinguish 5 levels of emotional development and 4 phases of cognitive development, one after the other. So stay tuned for that. Now, we all agree that coaching is a developmental, has developmental effects. But as I said, it can have exquisite and emphatic developmental effects only if you know developmental theory. And so therefore, I distinguish here between behavioral coaching, which is what you do and have learned in ICC, and adult developmental coaching. And you have been focused in the most general sense, if I may say so, on what people do and what they feel about what they do. Whereas in adult development coaching, in the course coming up, we are going to focus on how people see themselves in the world, what I call their frame of reference. In a way, you know, this means really following 2 different approaches or views of what is the human being. Behavioral coaching, as you have learned it, focuses on the client's ego and its behavior, like in NLP, while adult developmental coaching focuses on the client's self and the frame of reference, meaning the world view, how the client constructs the world, because we are constructing the world. The world is not just there. Everybody has a different view of the world, and that is a developmental issue. 30 years ago, my view of the world was dramatically different. And 10 years from now, your view of the world will also be dramatically different from what it is today, simply because you are under adult development. That's what the course is about. So let's look at the CDF methodology, which I said is a deepening of NLP. It gives you new tools. We see it's called the constructive developmental framework. It's called CDF because we are constructing the world emotionally, cognitively, psychologically. And the course I'm going to invite you, I'm inviting you to join, is about the first 2 elements here, what I call emotional development, ED, and CD, cognitive development. The first part of the course deals with social emotional development, 8 sessions, and the second deals with cognitive development, also 8 sessions. Now, I have experienced in last year that this matter I'm talking about cannot really be learned if you don't attend the course in person. And so we won't certify people who will not attend the course in person. We have 16 sessions, and you need to appear at least 12 of the 16 sessions to get credit for the course. And I'll tell you why, and you will find out when you join the course. The course is based on conversations between you and me in the class. And when you listen to these, if you just listen to the recording of the class, you only understand about 1/10 of what I'm teaching. So if you have to make up your mind as to whether you want to change your behavior and really learn developmental coaching, if you're not willing to show up in person, you can take this course, or you will not learn very much, at least. Because I am going to talk to you, and you're going to talk to me. You're going to be totally interactive with me. in contrast to what we are now. You can interrupt me anytime in the course and I will fall silent. And that is the way I've been teaching developmental coaching for 17 or 16 years now. All of my students will tell you that that's the way to run it. Now let me go a little further into these two parts of the course. As I said, it has 16 weeks, 16 sessions, 8 sessions each. There is a short written exam after each part. You need to attend in person because learning is based on the interchange of thoughts with the instructor in real time in each of the sessions. There is no other way of learning developmental coaching. I'll tell you why. In developmental coaching, you are primarily a listener. You are a developmental listener. You are a person who is trying to figure out from what level of development your client is speaking, because depending on that, you will coach differently. You cannot coach a level 3 person like you would coach a level 4 person. And I will make that clear now. So I want to introduce to you a repertoire of new coaching tools that take the new conditions of organizational work into account. And CDF actually combines behavioral coaching and development coaching. But in the course, I'm not going to deal with what you already know, which is behavioral coaching. I will deal only with what is in the green circle, because that is what CDF is about. Now, if we look at clients' worldview, there are 3 aspects. And by the way, I don't make a strict distinction between coaches and coaches, because you are just like your coachee. You are under development. You are undergoing adult development. It's no different for you than for your client. So this distinction that is done or made in behavioral coaching between coach and coachee is artificial and does not apply to developmental coaching. Because you are in the same boat with your client. You are developing your emotion and cognition, thinking, all the time until you die. And so you can't get out of that boat. That's the human condition. Now, if we look at you and your clients in this perspective, there are 3 dimensions, as I have already indicated, that we need to distinguish. The social emotional dimension of development, which has to do with how you relate to others and others to you. The cognitive dimension, which has to do with how you construct the world by thinking. And the psychological dimension, that has to do with how do you satisfy your needs for self-identity, delivering work, and emotional connection, which in the course I'm not going to talk about. Now, all these behavioral aspects here undergo developmental change, and I would say dramatic. I can tell you from experience. I just turned 80, and I know that at 70, I looked at the world very, very differently. And whatever age you are, if you think about what you could not do well 10 years ago, but can do now quite well, that's development. And if you look ahead and think about what you might be able to do in 10 years, that's development. So development takes time. You only make little steps. It's not a radical change. It's very gradual. And that's what we want to focus on, because from the language you use and your clients use, we can tell, or a developmentally schooled coach can tell what level you are speaking from. It has to do with how you use language. And because language is so important, we need in class to become more and more aware of what language we are using as we listen to each other. as a model for how we would listen to our clients. So let me give you some theoretical background of development coaching in the emphatic sense of adult developmental research. The first thing you ought to register is that learning is not development. To exaggerate, I would say you can learn all your life and never develop. Development is over time, learning is in time, or learning is horizontal, and development is vertical. So we speak of vertical, and I will, vertical means, of course, the two dimensions go together. The horizontal and the vertical always intersect at the present point in time. But the vertical dimension has to do with what level of development you are at that point in time. You can also look at it this way. What you have been doing is behavioral coaching horizontally. You have been interested in learning, changing behavior. All of that is horizontal. It has to do with learning ultimately. What I'm dealing with, and you will be dealing with in the course that's coming up, is vertical, across time. Across time means you are connecting two time points, where you were or the client was 5 years ago and where he or she is now. And we are looking at what happened in these 5 years and how what happened in these 5 years dramatically influences what the client is doing and behaving like right now. And so there is always a potential for the client and for you to go up in developmental level. However, you cannot force that. Only the client can develop. You can only facilitate development. And your responsibility as a coach is not to make the client go to a higher level, because you can't do that. You can only facilitate that the client be motivated to use his or her resources to go there. We look at adult development broadly. We can say this, that when we are born, we are a big subject, a big ego, and we have a small world. There is no mother, brother, no world outside of us yet. But as we age and become older, the subject is shrinking and the object is growing, which I will explain, so that at the end of your life, you will feel you are a tiny speck in a huge universe that will continue after you die. So you will become very, very humble, and the world in which you are will become much, 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 much larger. And that will show in the way you think, you feel, you link to collaborate with people, link to people, speak, write, whatnot. It's dramatic. You can look at it this way also, that we are shifting the subject-object balance. Subject here means what you are subject to and cannot control. Like where you were born, what kind of education you have, what your genes are, or what your beliefs are, which are largely unconscious. All this becomes less and less important as you mature. What becomes larger and larger is the world in which you are embedded into and into which you are thrown at birth. And so that means you can reflect on more and more, including yourself, as you mature. A more mature person is much more aware of themselves, can reflect on much more of what they are than a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, or whatever. Now, we can look at this development pedagogically or in terms of helping people. And we can refer to Vygotsky, who spoke of 4 zones of proximal development. That means development about to happen. When we are in zone 1 with the client or ourselves, we are looking at the competences the client already has. In zone 2, we are looking at pending development steps that are easy enough for the person to master by him or herself, for which they don't really need coaching. But we are working in zone 3, and that means we are concerned with developmental steps that are within reach, but cannot be accomplished without the help of another person, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a teacher, a therapist, or more highly developed peers. And then there is a zone 4, so that you see your limits. These are developmental stages that one can grasp intellectually, but that are out of reach under the given circumstances. So somebody, may be able intellectually to envision being at a higher stage, but they can't embody it. They can only intellectually talk about it, reason about it, but they can't be more highly developed. So nobody can be more highly developed than he actually is at the moment. And your task as a coach is to ask yourself, what, given that the client is at level X, can I do to further his or her potential? So you need to work with the developmental resources the client has. Now let me talk about the first part of the course now, which is about social emotional development. And here we are going to distinguish between 5 levels. Actually, the first one doesn't count here because that's about children and adolescents. So we're speaking about level 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these levels are dramatically different. So if I say a person is at level 3, that's a very different animal from a person at level 2 or 4 or 5. I will tell you why. We can look at development, emotional development, in terms of an oscillation between the focus on the self and on others. So when you are born, the focus is entirely on yourself before it gets to the focus on others. And at level 2, it is still, when you're an adolescent between 14 and, let's say, 21 or so, depending on the culture, you're still mainly focused on yourself, and your needs and desires come first. We call that the instrumental level. The journey from 2 to 3 is a socialization journey, because you need to be socialized to the point where you can become part of a group, and this group will define you. And so therefore we speak of level 3 as other dependent. When you are at level 3, you define yourself by the group you are part of. You have no value system of your own, although you may think you have, but you are not self-authoring. And you see here at level 4, or from 3 to 4, this is where most of your clients will be. They will try to go from other dependence to self-authoring. Now, in other dependence, people define themselves by others' expectations. At level 4, they follow their own unique value system, and that's why we call them self-authoring. They follow their own values even if they are kicked out of the group, ostracized, killed, imprisoned. They stand by their values. If you cannot do that, you are not at level 4. And actually, as I will show you, not everybody gets to level 4. So I would say your customers are between 3 and 4, and some maybe slightly above 4, and very, very, very few, if any, will be here at level 5, because at level 5 you have said goodbye to your self-authoring, and not that you have left behind your values, but you know that everybody has his or her own values which you respect, and you deal with these value systems as you deal with your own value system. So you see everybody as a peer, whereas at level 3 you see people as a boss and a subordinate and so forth. Now I could go further into this. Let me be brief. The other dependent person is focused on being acknowledged and recognized by peers. The self-authoring individual is self-reliant and focused on achievement. She can articulate a coherent theory of self in terms of values and principles. And the self-transforming person at level 5 is a humble individual no longer defined by origin, education, social status, and sees work as a mission for the greater good, being aware of his or her mortality. Now, what's probably clear to you is that depending on what level people are, they communicate and use language very, very differently. I don't have time to go into that, but from the communication, that's my point here, you can infer what level the client, what emotional level the client is at. So as I said, about 55% of people tend to be at level 3 and only 25 at level 4. So you could look at coaching from the point of view of society as an attempt to bring people from level 3 to 4. That's what you're really trying to do. And what does that mean? You're trying to increase their self-insight from moderate to high, their values from community value to self-determined, their needs, being subordinate to community and work group, to flowing from their striving for integrity, their need of control moderate to low, their communication being exchange one-to-one to real dialogue. A person below level 4 can't have a real dialogue, and so forth. So these are the developmental changes in people's emotional self-definition. You can see that there are some people at level 2, but only 10%. Some of them sit in prisons, others not. At level 5, there are even less than 10, actually. Now, that's the first part of the course. I teach you tools to infer and understand from listening what level your client is. And I should have said the following. Between these levels, there are 4 intermediate levels. And I'm going to teach you the intermediate levels so that you can determine not just level 3 and 4, but levels in between, which is very important for social emotional coaching. Otherwise, actually, you can't do any social emotional coaching. Now, let me go to thinking. Thinking is presently not dealt with in coaching at all, because there is no theory of development of thinking, which I am introducing and have introduced for 15 years now, with books and articles and teachings. One way to look at how clients think, that means use concepts, is to say that as they mature, they are moving from logic analytical thinking to systems thinking to transformational thinking. Here you are, in analytical thinking, you are just breaking down complexity into parts. In systems thinking, you are focused on relationships between elements of a system and between systems. And in transformational thinking, which I refer to in DTF, you are thinking very complexly in a way I will now show you. Now let's link this to NLP. NLP has begun to teach coaches to focus on their clients' use of natural language in order to improve communication and boost development, personal development. This is helpful, but it's insufficient for executive coaching, especially because NLP only focuses on the content of what people say, not on the structure. And that's the important innovation in developmental thinking, that we have to learn about the structure of people's thinking. So every sentence I'm saying to you and that you are saying to me has a content, which is what it is about. But it also has a structure, which I will show you is determined by what I call the 4 moments of dialectic. So in our second part of the course, we are going to focus on the structure of clients' thinking, not only on what they say. We will put what they say in brackets in order to find out what the structure of thinking is. Here are the 4 moments of dialectic, briefly, in pictures. We have 4: context, process, relationship, and transformation. These are called the 4 moments of dialectic. Dialectic is a Greek term. It comes from dialogue, but it means a kind of thinking in which you are not only thinking in terms of facts or in terms of single details, but of systems in such a way that you go beyond seeing the world as a static system. If we look at a tree trunk, you know, that's a static system. The rings indicate the age of the tree, 1 ring per year. And we can describe this tree, and the client can, in great detail, but it's a static world. Most clients speak in context terms. They have no idea of process, relationship, or transformation, or they have little idea. They speak of change a lot, but they don't know what they're saying, because change has to do with process, like in this wave. And that is the structure of thinking, not the content. I can speak of change, that's the content, but the structure of my thinking is not therefore a process. So what is a sentence or statement in which process thought forms are actually truly used? That I want to teach you in the course. So you have to recalibrate your listening to become deep listening, dialectical listening, developmental listening, focused on structure. Behavioral coaching, as you have done, only deals with content, and thus with context. It's all about what. But context already goes beyond content because it deals with levels. It deals with what is not there, but is implied. So in process thought forms, we are thinking about what is not there, but what will appear tomorrow. We are thinking about the future. We are thinking about the indications of the future in the present and the past in the present, because we are assuming that the world is an unceasing transformation, like a wave. The third moment of dialectic is relationship, but not the relationship you know, the logical relationship, the intrinsic relationship, which has to do with totality. To give an example, you and I, we are human beings, and we are related at the moment through an audio link, but we are intrinsically related in terms of our genes, our consciousness, our history, the culture we are in. And here in dialectical thinking. We are dealing with intrinsic relationships. The fact that I could not be without you and you could not be without me because we are intrinsically related. We form a totality, we form a common ground, and we cannot reduce this common ground called humanity to a single individual. We would de-totalize what reality really is. So relationship is a little bit harder to understand and process, but high-level executives that I have coached have a very good grasp of relationship. They know that what they are dealing with is intrinsically related essentially with everything else they are dealing with. Their strategic plan is intrinsically related to the marketplace, to the levels of accountability in their organization, to their own developmental level. They know all that. And a coach who does not know that or cannot deal with that is not effective at levels at which executives work. Now, transformation is even more complex, as you can see from the image, because although you're dealing with systems, you're dealing with systems that are clashing, that are near breakdown or are near eruption into a different system, which is what the marketplace is about. This is what high-level executives think about transformation. They don't think about change. Change is simple. No, transformation means, the way a beehive transforms over the year, the way your body transforms from one day to the other. You're not the same person that you were yesterday because all your cells have shifted. That's the world, that's the real world. And so we want in development coaching, going beyond NLP, we want to capture this dynamic world in which our clients and we ourselves as coaches are embedded. Now, research has shown that to go from one to the other moment of dialectic is not so easy because we have to do this in steps, in 4 phases. Right now, I think you are about here, understanding. Maybe you are already at step 1, but you have a long way to go, and so do your clients. So in step 1, if I want to very much simplify the research findings, you are probably very good at thinking in terms of context. But as I'm indicating, which remains to be found out in class, can you think in terms of process? Can you think in terms of relationship? Or even transformation? That will be the question in coaching. So we have a ladder to climb. If we look at it statically, yes, at 4 moments of dialectic again, but they are interrelated. Of course they are interrelated because even in speech, if I talk about, let's say, I'm going to talk about the tree stump in terms of context as something static that has layers. In my speech, I can change to look at that tree in terms of process. I can think about what the past history of the tree actually has looked like, and what its future will look like if there is a future to it. So people's speech, the more educated a person is and the more developed, education is not the same as development, but the more developed a person is, the more of these 4 moments of dialectic and their thought forms he or she can master or masters. And I only need to listen to a client for 2 minutes to tell you how developed cognitively they are. I want to teach you that. It's a very good tool, just as I want to teach you to infer at what level of development emotionally 2, 3, 4, or 5 the person is. So this is kind a kind of power coaching. So these four moments of dialectic are linked in speech, but they're also linked in reality, because we think of the world outside of us, which we don't control but are thrown into. That world is also structured in terms of four moments of dialectic. And so if we want to have any chance to get close to that reality, which we're talking about so much, we need to become thinkers who can deal with these four moments of dialectic. And that's what the course will make a beginning to show you. It's an introduction. Now, what is the structure of complex thinking? We look at the four moments of dialectic here, and then here, the three columns. In context, the focus of thinking is on the bigger picture. What is the biggest picture of this situation, event, or myself that I can have? In logical thinking, most of the time we only see part of the reality, and we are not, in context, we are not looking at change. We are only, dividing up something into its components, its details. That's relatively easy. But in transformational thinking at the highest level of cognitive development, we will not only see the biggest picture, but because we have also been able or learned to deal with these three moments of dialectic, we'll have a very, very much more complex notion of what the world is like. And since we have to act in the world, the more we know about this world that we are constructing differently, you and me, the better. When we think in terms of process thought forms, we think of emerging change. And that is something that logical thinking cannot really deal with. The world is not logical. The world is in constant motion, and logical thinking fails. It can only deal with the world as a static system. That's why we need process thought forms, because we need to recognize the flows of ongoing change into which or in which we want to intervene. Now, what about the third moment of dialectic that I will teach you about in the course? I call it totality and common ground. Let me give an example of these four moments of dialectic. I happen to be a beekeeper, and in front of my window in the garden is a beehive. Let's just think about what a beehive would be described as in terms of these four moments of dialectic. In context thought forms, the beehive is just a box, a wooden box with 10 wooden frames that are lined with wax in which bees collect water, propolis, honey, and the brood from which new bees come. So you can look into it and you see the frames, 10 frames, but that's not the beehive. The beehive is a living being that changes like you do dramatically over the year with the seasons. In January, there may be maybe 5,000 bees. In July, there will be 30,000 bees in the same hive, and so forth. To understand that, we need to look at process. What is the emerging change that's happening in the beehive? So if you relate this to work, if you want to make a client become more cognizant of the environment they deliver work in, and of him or herself in this environment, as long as you only deal with context and a static picture of him or her, you don't get very far. You need to think with him, about him, in terms of emerging change. how can this person bring about change in himself? How can he or she bring about change in the organization, which is probably what they want to do? So we need to move away from focusing on stability and predictability and so forth. Now, continuing with the beehive. The beehive is a totality shared by all bees. If you look at a single bee, you do not see the beehive. You may see the beehive if you find that a single bee will attack you to defend the hive. If you threaten the hive, that means the bee consciousness has the whole hive in its core. The bee, all bees act as a totality. They are part of a totality. They are intrinsically related, whether it's the queen, the worker bees, or the drones. That is what the world is like, that everything is related to everything else. And that's what CDF introduces into coaching. Disequilibrium and balance is the most difficult to understand aspect or moment of dialectic, because here we have to pull context, process, and relationship together. So a transformational thinker with a coach or client would be one who can look at the beehive and talk about it and act accordingly, not just as a static entity, but who has a grasp of the changes in the beehive from season to season, if that were a topic, and who can think in terms of the totality of the hive in a dynamic way, like a company would be a beehive, dynamically changing all the time. When you do that, when you can do that, then you can speak about disequilibrium and also balance. This is where balance resides. So you need to integrate these processes. Now, in the course, since it is only an introduction, I will only be able to lay the groundwork for this kind of coaching, especially cognitive coaching. And I myself practice cognitive coaching, especially with teams. Because in teams, in order to create collaborative intelligence and consensus, you need to do cognitive coaching. The team has a personal process and a task process, as I say, and I will teach, of course, about that in the fall. The personal process is largely emotional and has to do with how people relate in the team. And most of the team literature and team coaching is dealing with that. But what I'm dealing with, and nobody else seems to be dealing with much, is the thinking that goes on in the team. And if you cannot, as a coach, bring the thinking in a team focused on the 4 moments of dialectic, you're not going to be very effective. And this is crucial for the task process, where the goal that is to be reached is in focus, and the steps towards the goal. So there are always 2 issues in coaching teams. There is the bonding issue of the members of the team, which is the social, emotional, personal side. And there is the task, the pure task itself, the goal, how it is to be reached, the strategy to be followed, the steps to be followed, the alternative strategies to be followed, or to be kept in mind, and so forth. So I know I've unloaded a lot of stuff on you, and I would now suggest that we make this briefly interactive at the end for questions you may have. I have already shown you these sessions, and let me just say one thing at the end. I think there is now consensus that what makes coaches effective is not their skills, but their level of adult development. You can use ontological coaching, ICC coaching, whatever coaching you like. These are just skills. But the ultimate effectiveness you will have as a coach depends on your own level of development. And there are some links here that you can look up. So, Alexis, can we make this interactive now? Thank you for your attention.
Of course, sure we can. So we would like to see or to hear your questions, and to do that, we're going to enable your microphone so you can participate and talk to Dr. Laska directly. So if you can please raise your hands, or you can also write your questions on the questions panel. We would prefer if you could raise your hand so we could unmute your microphone so you can participate. Let's see who has any questions.
Maybe you have simple definitional questions as to what do you mean by social emotional, what do you mean by cognitive, how do the two relate, or any other question that comes to mind for you.
We have a question from Nora, but I understand
Nora, yes.
you prefer to hear them, right? To hear and interact. So Nora, I'm going to open your microphone so you can participate. If you could please unmute your own microphone. Hello?
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hello, Nora. I can hear you. This is Otto.
Thank you, Otto, for the beautiful presentation you have given us. And I just have a question. I have seen that we have you have shown four frames regarding in what step are people, most of the people or coaches. And I have a question: in what level are individuals that are self-employed, such as independent jobs?
Yes. So let me just say, Nora, this is the kind of communication we will have in every class. You will talk to me, I will talk to you, and that's why you need to be there in person. This cannot be taught recording, because I will teach you how to listen to others and your clients and so forth. So my answer would be this, Nora, thank you. I would think, well, first of all, whether you are self-employed or not will not define your development level, of course, because that's an internal quality. But I would think that people who are self-employed tend to be at a higher social emotional level and also level of thinking, because they have to stand on their own value system. They are not depending primarily on others, but on their own strategy. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sure.
So
I was wondering because if you are dependent, you are always working to have recognition from your bosses or recognition or get one step ahead in order to get another position in the company. But when you are self-employed, depending on what? On your own probabilities or something like that, or on your customers, or what?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good informal example, Nora, for the distinction between what I call level 3 and level 4. This is only an hypothesis, because we would have to make an assessment, which we can do in CDF, of the person. But offhand, without further research, we can hypothesize and test that the person who is self-employed probably is also further developed than a person in a dependent position. I fully agree with you. That's a good example for the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Is there another question?
Yes, there's another question from Juan Ernesto. Sorry, another question from Ariel. But I don't know if Ariel would like to participate. I'm opening Ariel's microphone. Ariel, I just opened your microphone and unmuted it. If you can unmute your microphone and you can say your question out loud for Alaska to answer.
Sure. Thank you. Well, thank you also, Otto, for this presentation. Well, I was hearing all the comments and the suggestions and all the status that you were talking about. I was thinking about a question, which is, according to your experience, what questions do you think ignite transformation in a person, and how nonverbal communication affect that?
Yes, thank you, Ariel. You're asking me what question. I think it is not only a question, but what I wasn't able to show you in this short presentation is that every coach and client has a potential, so that nobody is really at a single stage or level. So if you are at one of the intermediate levels between 3 and 4, the lower level is your risk and the higher level is your potential. So I would say your question for me has to do with what is the client's potential in terms of developmental level. We can find that out through interview, but also informally. And I would say, as a coach, we need to be focused on that potential. And that is best done through developmental theory. If we know the intermediate level, we also know what the potential looks like. And we can, as a coach, focus on that potential. And there are many, many fine distinctions I cannot make here that you would learn in the course. So yes, good questions have to do with it, but you also need a knowledge of the potential in reference to the stages that I will teach you.
Thank you, Otto. And just one more question, because you got me thinking about that. How can we detect that potential? Do we need to use any specific test, or is there any specific set of questions, for example, we can ask the client to detect the level of their potential?
Yes, this has to do with what I call developmental listening, Ariel. And there are books about that by me, and I can send you a link. I can send all of you a link to the first volume, which is on emotional development, and the second, that is on cognitive development. And actually what I'm teaching you an introduction to is developmental listening for level and phase of cognitive development. So yes, in an interview, which is an art and science at the same time, most people who know CDF today have learned CDF from me through interviewing. And I will talk about the course. And actually, I will give you text passages in the course by which you can learn what level a client is speaking from. That will be the focus of the first part of the course.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Otto.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you all for attending. I hope to see you.
Oh yes, we expect to see you there, of course, on the 20th. It seems there are no more hands risen, so, and nobody else has any more questions. So I think without further ado, I think we can say goodbye. I want to personally thank everybody for being here. I hope this information was very, very useful, especially for what's about to come in our course. And Otto, thank you very much for your talk today.
Yeah, thank you, Alexis, and thank you all. It was a pleasure to meet you. I hope to meet you in person in June.
Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Goodbye.